Card components, a UI element that is used to display various types of information ranging from designing team pages to product pages and even pricing pages. Today we'll take a look at how to create card components and style them using CSS. We'll be doing this with React, and we'll look at how to create these components and pass information down through props. We'll then take a look at how to get information from a data file and populate our UI. Finally, we'll be using CSS custom properties in combination with Flexbox in order to style the page. So if you find content like this useful, leave a like and subscribe, and let's get into it. We have a data file that is storing all the data regarding a specific person on the team. This data file is structured as a JSON format that has a key of data and a value that is a list of objects. In a later video, we'll take a look at how to get this data from a backend API, but for now, the data is being stored locally. Now in our app.js, we first have to import the data file and then make a reference to it. Now because we want to target the list of objects, we have to set a variable and use dot notation to get the list of objects out of that data file. Remove the hello world as the placeholder and set a title. We're just going to call it meet the team. Now we're going to be creating a card, and to do this we have to create a container that is going to hold all the information for a particular individual. Inside this card we're going to have some elements like the picture, the name, the email, and the position of that team member. Now before we go any further, it is important to remember that the data holder variable is referencing a list of objects in the data file. So in order to show any of the information, we first have to loop over the list, and at each iteration we have to display the information that is held within that object. We can do this by calling a map function on the data holder variable. This function takes in another function as its argument, from which we can return a specific value. Here we're going to be returning a piece of JSX, which is going to be rendered on the screen. We're going to create a div and give it a class of card. Inside this card, we're going to create an image element, and for its source, we're going to reference the avatar in the object of the data file. Give it a piece of alt text and give the image a class as well. Repeat this for the other elements. Now save and see the information being rendered in the browser. Structuring the code like this is good and easier for smaller projects, but as the project grows, you may want to consider isolating certain parts of the app into its own component. This makes the code base cleaner and easier to read for other developers. Inside the component folder, we're going to create a new file and name it card.js. I'm going to be using React snippets here to generate a quick React template and then copy the card div and the contents inside into the card.js component. Information can be passed down into a component through the props argument, which is an object. So we can simply destructure it and get the object keys directly. We have to replace all the user dot variables with the destructured variable names in the card component. Now inside the app.js file, we first have to import the card component so that we can use it inside of this file. We then have to replace the div with the class of card with the card component itself, and then pass in the props and set the values respectively. Now you should see that you get the exact same thing that is being rendered as before. Now that we have that all sorted, let's move on to styling this component using CSS. Here we have a CSS file that has been set up to get a font from Google and do all the necessary resets. We're going to be using CSS custom properties to set things like the font family, the size, and the colors so that we don't have to do that later in our CSS. Reference the app. Give it a bit of padding and place everything in the center. Here we're using display grid in place item center to ensure that everything inside of the grid is centered. We're then going to be setting all the default fonts and colors and background colors for the app. We're doing this using the variables that we set previously. We're now going to reference the card container itself. We're going to give it a bit of margin to push it down from the top and then give it a display of flex. This is going to ensure that all the elements inside of the card container go into a row. We're then going to space out all the individual cards and place everything in the center. We're going to be setting a property known as flex wrap to wrap. This property ensures that the elements inside of the container are going to wrap if they run out of space to put elements. We're now going to reference the card itself. We're going to give it a display of flex and set the flex direction to column. We're going to place everything in the center and then give the elements a bit of spacing. We're also going to give the elements a bit of spacing from the sides and the top by setting the padding to 3 rem. We're then going around the corners of the card by setting the border radius to the predefined border radius that we set in the variables. We're going to set the background color and give it a box shadow. Now the transition is going to come into play when we set the hover effect. Reference the hover pseudo class on the card. Now set the transform translate Y to 50 pixels. This is going to ensure that when the card is hovered on, the card itself moves down 50 pixels. I'm also going to set the scale X to 20 pixels, but I found that this doesn't really do anything. We're now going to set the size of the card image itself. We're going to set both the width and the height to the same value and set the border radius to 50%. This ensures that we get a circle when the component is being rendered. We're then going to give the image a nice purple border by setting the border size to 6 pixels, solid, and then passing in the color that we want. Lastly, we're just going to set the font size and weight for the name, the email, and the position. Now, having built this, the goal is just not to show you how to build out these components, but to get you thinking in a way that will allow you to build out other components so that you can use them in any app that you want to create. So if you found this video useful, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.